Mr. Biden said he will not bow down from the race. Canada beat Venezuela in Copa America. Good morning and happy Independence Day for Americans. This is Amir Shakil 5858. I am Amir Budnam. I am thankful to all international news resources and my team. Following are the news which have been reported by American, European, Asian, African, Australian, Canadian channels and AP, AFP and Reuters news agencies. Now the headlines. A moderate selected as president in Iran. LCBO on strike in Ontario. Storm barrel eye his next target. Texas. Wildfires in southwest US. Former astronaut overcoming obstacles with NASA. A Russian drone attack in Ukraine cut power for thousands of people. Reports that Hamas is agreeing to US-backed ceasefire plan, whereas an Israeli strike killed 16 people in refugee camp in Gaza yesterday. COVID virus cases are rise in America. France goes to second level of election.
Canada scores a major soccer victory tonight, defying the odds against Venezuela.
Imagine Canada in the Copa America semi-finals. You'd never hear about that.
And the stunning rise of Canada's soccer program. Hanging on.
Are you more frail?
No.
While U.S. President Joe Biden insists he's the only man for the job. Change in Iran?
As long as this regime is in power, there is no real reform can happen.
But can this former heart surgeon truly upset the apple cart in the Islamic Republic? Plus, LCBO on strike.
And we're going to stand with all of you, day in and day out.
The creative ways Ontarians are getting their summer spirits.
Global National. Reporting tonight, Anthony Robart.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. Well, not many dared to say this just a few days ago, but Canada's national men's soccer team is now competing with some of the world's best. They delivered a historic...
Tonight, bracing for barrel as the Storm eyes its next target. The Texas coast prepares for a potential hit.
The storm surge along the coast could be devastating.
The system building up steam after battering parts of Mexico and the Caribbean.
Food, shelter, coming to let my life gone, have my life gone.
While sweltering heat settles in over much of the west coast, the dry conditions fueling wildfires. Canada scores a Cinderella story at Copa America.
I don't think anybody necessarily expected them to be here.
The team's historic run takes them to the semifinals. Plus, the mother inspiring her kids by going back to class.
If I go back and I get A's and B's, will you try to match me?
Completing her course load to receive a diploma decades later.
CTV National News with Heather Butts.
Good evening. We are following a major weather threat tonight. Tropical Storm Beryl. It's now heading for...
Tonight on PBS News Weekend, President Biden dismisses concerns over his age and performance as calls grow for him to drop out of the presidential race.
Look, I mean, if the Lord Almighty came out and said, Joe, get out of the race, and get out of the race, the Lord Almighty's not coming down.
Then Iran elects its first reformist candidate in 2 decades, what his victory means for the Islamic Republic's future. And former astronaut Katie Coleman on overcoming obstacles during more than 2 decades with NASA. Good evening. I'm Lisa Desjardins. John Yang is away. President Biden is facing more calls for him to jump out of the 2024 race following a disappointing debate performance last week. Today, moderate Democratic Congresswoman Angie Craig publicly declared that Biden should step aside as the party's nominee. Iran has a new president-elect after a runoff between a reformist candidate and a well-known hardliner. The reform-minded Masoud Pezeshkian won by nearly 10 percentage points in an election that saw record low turnout during the first round of voting. Although his win has brought hope to some Iranians, others remain skeptical of the president-elect's ability to change underlying problems.
Our life is getting worse every day. It is true that salaries increase a bit, but at the same time, living expenses have increased.
Among his promises, Pezeshkian vowed to reach out to the West and ease restrictions on the country's headscarf mandate for women. We'll discuss what the election means for Iran's future later in the program. In northern Ukraine, Russian drone attacks hit a vital energy facility overnight, cutting off thousands of homes from power and water. Crews are working to repair the damage and restore power, according to Ukrainian officials. The drone attacks are part of Russia's strategy to target key infrastructure. Some new hope for a possible ceasefire in Gaza. The Associated Press reports that Hamas has initially signed off on a U.S.-backed ceasefire and has dropped its demand that Israel pledge to end the war. That's been a key sticking point in negotiations. The announcement comes as the Gaza Health Ministry announced an airstrike killed 16 people and wounded dozens more at a refugee camp. Israel says it found terrorists in the area and tried to avoid civilians. After a springtime lull, coronavirus cases in the U.S. are ticking up. New data from the Centers for Disease Control show COVID is on the rise, especially in the West. Nationwide, there's been a 23% jump in ER visits. The CDC says it is able to predict spikes in cases due to wastewater testing. Still to come on PBS News Weekend, a look at Iran's future as they elect their next president, and former astronaut Katie Coleman on the joys and challenges of life in space.
This is PBS News Weekend from WETA Studios in Washington, home of the PBS NewsHour, weeknights on PBS.
Reformist Masoud Pezeshkian will ascend to the Iranian presidency in a delicate moment for the Islamic Republic, both on the world stage and within its borders. He faces a government still largely controlled by hardline clerics, tension with the West over Iran's nuclear program, and domestic frustrations with the regime. Ali Rogan has more.
To discuss what this means for Iran, the U.S., and other stakeholders, I'm joined by
Tonight, punishing heat. Record-setting temperatures impacting at least 18 states. Prime conditions for wildfires out west.
Once the body kind of starts getting dehydrated, it's harder to bounce back from that.
But not for firefighters. Down south, barrels toward Texas. The powerful storm packing high winds and extreme rainfall could be upgraded back to a hurricane. We'll show you where it could hit.
Well, I just had a bad night.
Also tonight, doubling down and damage control. Did President Biden's high-stakes interview win over any Democrats calling for him to step aside? Our Natalie Brand asks what.
It's about the future of our democracy.
Plus, what's in the numbers? What the latest jobs report says about the state of the economy and what it means for your money. And Voice for Change. Country music legend Randy Travis takes his fight for artist compensation all the way to Capitol Hill.
What is your message to lawmakers?
And later, Birds of a Feather. Why these parrots hightailed it from the tropics to find a new place to roost in Los Angeles.
Some people complain about the noise, but most of the people I talk to really, really like them.
This is the CBS Weekend News from Washington with Adriana Diaz.
Good evening. From the Mexican border all the way up to Canada, temperatures are soaring. The high heat creating a tinderbox for wildfires out west in California.
Tonight, the interview fallout. President Biden vowing to stay in the race as calls grow louder within his own party for him to step aside. The president meeting today with his campaign co-chairs one day after he told our George Stephanopoulos only the Lord Almighty can drive him from the race. But now a fifth Democrat in Congress has joined calls for him to drop out ahead of tomorrow's meeting of House Democrats, while some major donors are threatening to withhold their money. The president's defenders trying to calm the panic. Mary Alice Parks from the White House. Rick Clyde on the road ahead. Texas braces for Beryl, the deadly storm that wreaked havoc through the Caribbean, building up steam as it takes aim at the Gulf Coast, likely to make landfall again as a hurricane. Our team in the storm zone. The heat dome tightens its grip. More than 125 million Americans under heat alerts. Those brutal temperatures and dry conditions fueling more wildfires in California. Additional evacuations ordered. A promising NFL rookie and two former college football players killed in a devastating car crash. An alleged drunk driver now facing charges. A 21st birthday party turns deadly outside Cincinnati. At least 4 killed, several others hurt. The holiday weekend travel blitz, millions take to the skies with records expected to fall as the 4th of July holiday becomes the rush to get home. The busiest day tomorrow. Another historic first for Caitlin Clark, what she just did that no other WNBA rookie has ever done before. A daring and dramatic save. The young man who stopped a runaway boat with a leap of faith. And America Strong tonight, the 9-year-old activist who took matters into his own hands, determined to make a difference.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight. Good.
Oh, Griff, I'm not sure I have ever heard you flub a word. But anyway, moving on now for more reaction to President Biden defying calls to step aside. Let's bring in former Trump campaign economic advisor and Heritage Foundation senior visiting fellow in economics, that's quite a title, Stephen Moore. Steve, great to see you today. Right off the bat, let me ask you for your reaction to Congressman Garamendi. He said, let's stop this speeding train of calls for Biden to step aside. I think he called it a tsunami also. What's your reaction to what he said?
Well, as someone who's working with the Trump campaign, we want to run against Joe Biden. So we hope Joe Biden stays in the race. And let's have this rematch between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. I've not seen Joe Biden in person for many, many years, so I can't judge his mental capacities. But, you know, the question was asked about whether Donald Trump should take a cognitive test. I've been around Donald Trump a lot, Anita, over the last 6 months. And the guy, you know, he's 15, 16 years older than me, and his mental capacity is amazing. I'm slowing down a little bit, but he is not. And so I think the difference in their mental capacities is going to be an issue. But more importantly, look, I'm an economist, Anita. We watch want to run not just against Joe Biden's, mental health, but we want to run against his record. I mean, look, this is a president who's made the average family $2,000 poorer than they were 4 years ago. This is a president who raised the inflation rate to over 9%, the highest inflation rate we've had in this country in 30 or 40 years. This is a president who can't control the border. This is a president who's raised gas prices $1.25 higher than they were when Trump was president. So on the issues, there's just no question that Donald Trump has a much, much better record as president.
Yeah, but Steve, it is a fair question, and you work with former President Trump. Do you think he would take a cognitive test? I mean, it's a fair question to ask him as well.
It is a fair question, but I'm not the one, I'm not the one to ask that to. The president is. But I just guarantee you, if he does take that cognitive test, he will pass it with flying colors. I see no slowdown. I've been with him now 8 or 9 years, and the guy's stamina and his ability to do 4 or 5 events a day, Anita, and to fly across the country, he wears everybody out around him. That's how he is in terms of his energy level.
Okay, well, let's turn back to the economy, your favorite subject, because it's always about the economy and politics, right? And last night, President Biden touted the economy in the exclusive interview with ABC News' George Stephanopoulos. Let's listen to what he said.
He just announced 200,000 new jobs. We're moving in a direction that no one's ever taken on. We now have 16 Nobel laureates, 16 of them in economics, saying that Biden's next term would be, based on what he wants to do, enormous success. Trump's plan would cause a recession, would significantly increase inflation.
Okay, so he touted the June jobs report. He said 206,000 new jobs. We have a graphic to show our audience about where these jobs are. There you see 206,000 new jobs. Where are these jobs? They are in the government sector. They are in healthcare. Some jobs in construction. Manufacturing is down. But we talked a lot about, there we go, there's the graphic. What do you think about where these jobs are? Most of them in the government and healthcare sectors. What does that tell you about the economy?
It tells us that we're growing the economy in all the wrong places, Anita. We don't want the government to be hiring more workers. My God, we're running a $2 trillion annual deficit, which, by the way, makes probably Joe Biden, you can make a strong case he's the most financially reckless president in American history. We've never seen anything like this before. And we're adding jobs. They're government workers at a time. Look, if you're running a business and you're losing $2 trillion a year, you don't go out there and hire more and more workers, which is exactly what the government's done. By the way, the healthcare system is a kind of appendage of the government. And then you look at the sectors where people make things in America: the construction industry, the manufacturing industry, wholesaling, mining, drilling. All of those are moribund right now, and we're not seeing the kind of jobs that you can raise a family on. So I don't see. Oh, one other quick thing, Anita. If you look at the jobs over the last 3 or 4 months, most of them are part-time jobs. They're not 40-hour jobs. So this is one of the reasons people can't afford to pay, for their gas, for their groceries, for their mortgage, for their rent, and why people are wrecking. You may have seen just last week over $1 trillion of credit card debt now.
Nigeria for France 24. Join me on all updates on Nigeria on France 24 news programs.
Chinwe Osondu, one of the 200 France 24 correspondents around the world.
Hello and welcome to Daybreak here on France 24. Here are this morning's main news headlines. An Israeli airstrike kills at least 16 people who've been sheltering at a UN-run school in Gaza. The violence comes despite renewed hopes that momentum may be building towards reaching a ceasefire deal. As residents brace for further scorching temperatures, firefighters in the U.S. state of California battle multiple blazes. Forecasters say the mercury there could hit 54 degrees Celsius in Death Valley this Sunday. We'll be crossing live for the very latest to Wasim Cornet, our correspondent in LA. And polls open in New Caledonia as France holds the second round of its snap legislative election. French voters who live overseas are also casting ballots in the U.S., Canada and elsewhere. Good to have you with us. First this hour to Gaza, where at least 16 people have been killed in an Israeli strike on a UN-run school where thousands of displaced Palestinians have been sheltering. Dozens more were wounded. 5 local journalists died in a separate attack in the territory. This latest violence coming amid renewed hope that a ceasefire can be reached between the warring sides. Stop-start efforts to secure a truce resumed on Friday, and mediators are expected to meet again in the coming days.
Relatives and supporters gathered in Tel Aviv for their weekly protest on Saturday, demanding a deal to release the remaining hostages held by Hamas in Gaza.
Netanyahu needs to understand that he must do the deal, he must bring them home now. It's already 9 months.
Among the hostages being held are Gali and Ziv Berman. Their brother Liran is waiting for a possible breakthrough on a deal.
We know that they are alive because released hostages from the first deal
in the 56th day, they saw them, they were separated, but they were alive. And because no one told us otherwise, we are firmly believe, without any hint there, but we are firmly believe that they are still alive and they are strong and they will come back to us.
Mediation efforts in Doha and Qatar continue amid indications of moves towards a possible phased hostage and ceasefire agreement, with Hamas giving initial approval to US-backed proposals and dropping a demand that Israel first commit to a permanent ceasefire before an agreement. The Israeli Prime Minister's office is saying there are still gaps between the parties. It will send a delegation next week to continue talks with Qatari mediators. Egyptian television reports meanwhile say that Cairo will host Israeli and US delegations to discuss outstanding issues. Gaza officials say the conflict has claimed the lives of more than 38,000 Palestinians since the Hamas attack 9 months ago. Multiple deaths were reported in an Israeli strike on a school sheltering displaced Palestinian families in central Gaza on Saturday. The Israeli military said it took precautions to minimize risk to civilians before targeting militants. Hamas denied its fighters were there.
Turning now to the US, where more than 100 million people are under heatwave alerts. Dangerously high temperatures are expected to shatter more records from the east to the west coast over the coming days. In California, firefighters have been battling multiple wildfires. Well, for the very latest, let's call live now to Wasim Cornet. He's our correspondent in LA. So Wasim, just take us through the latest there. Heat wave raging while wildfires burn. Temperatures of up to 54 degrees, I believe, expected in Death Valley later.
Yeah, California and the greater western United States are in the middle of a very severe heat wave, one of the most severe and one of the longest that this part of the region, this part of the country have seen in recent years. Let's talk numbers, let's talk records. Las Vegas, the city in Nevada, which is no stranger to heat, of course, has a chance of tying or breaking its all-time record every single day for the next 5 days. That all-time record currently standing at 47.2 Celsius, that's 117 Fahrenheit. In terms of all-time records, well, it's a done deal already in the city of Palm Springs, which is a very popular tourist destination for people who live in the Los Angeles area. They hit a record-breaking 51.1 Celsius, 124 Fahrenheit on Friday. And of course, we can't, of course, forget about Death Valley, which is the hottest place on Earth. They are expected to reach a toasty 53 Celsius, 128 Fahrenheit this Sunday. And of course, these very high temperatures combined with low humidity and strong winds are creating very severe fire conditions. We've seen dozens of fires flare up in California, in Nevada, in the western U.S. over these past few days. Luckily, firefighters have been able to make significant progress in most cases, but the most worrying fire currently right now still burning is the Lake Fire in Santa Barbara County, which is northwest of Los Angeles. Already more than 12,000 acres have been burned. There are evacuation orders in effect, and unfortunately, even though there is proximity to the Pacific Ocean, these temperatures remain very warm into the overnight hours, which of course is not helping firefighters in the next few hours and next few days.
And we're seeing they seem to be becoming ever more frequent wildfires there. Are authorities concerned about further blazes?
Well, yes, very frequent, except actually for last summer. If you'll recall, the winter of 2023 was exceptionally wet. The spring of 2023 was also very cool. And the summer was also quite mild in hindsight. And there was almost no wildfire season at all, mostly thanks to that wet winter and spring. And also because of that exceptional weather event in the middle of August, Hurricane Hillary, which doused California with rain at the height of its fire season. So, of course, almost nothing burned last summer. And after that, of course, we have had another very, very wet winter, very cool spring. And so, unfortunately, we have had now almost 2 years of back-to-back unparalleled vegetation growth, weeds, grass, bushes. And of course, that is setting the stage for potentially an unparalleled amount of fuel for wildfires, because we have now exited the El Nino climate pattern, which delivers cooler than average temperatures for this part of the world. We've now entered La Nina, which delivers above average temperatures for this part of the world. And climate forecasters are saying we are expecting way above average temperatures until at least September. So combine that with, very significant vegetation growth these past few years. Unfortunately, it's looking like a very dangerous wildfire season for the western U.S.
Wasim, for now, thank you so much. That is our correspondent in LA, Wasim Cornet. Well, we are staying in the US, where residents in Texas are bracing for the arrival of Storm Beryl. It's expected to regain hurricane strength as it moves across the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico before making landfall in the United States on Monday. Officials are warning people along the Texas coastline to prepare for possible flooding, heavy rains and winds. Oliver Farry has more.
The Mexican resort of Tulum gets back to normal after the passing of Storm Beryl. Like elsewhere on the Yucatan Peninsula, the city was largely spared in these parts are getting ever more challenging.
Voters here in France head to the poll this Sunday for the second round of the country's snap legislative election called by President Macron 4 weeks ago. 289 seats are needed in order to win an absolute majority in Parliament. Some 500 contests are being decided in runoffs. Most of them involve either 2 or, in certain cases, 3 candidates. Polls open at 8 a.m. here in mainland France. Voting is already underway in overseas territories like New Caledonia. French people who live abroad are also casting ballots, including in the US and Canada. Let's hear from Sinful.
I think the stakes are extremely high, and I'm very concerned about the future of France and the world, and that's why I vote. I've always voted in France too, and I continue to do so here in the US. I take it very seriously.
It's very important to vote, especially right now. I don't know if there's been a more important election than this. I've talked about it a lot with my parents and tried to convince people around me to vote as well.
Especially at our age, who won't vote. We may feel politics doesn't concern us, but it will directly affect us. We're the next generation, so I think it's very important to vote now.
I think French people around the world feel connected. Even if we're not in France, we find ourselves thinking about a country. So yes, we all have to vote even if we're not there. It's important. It counts for something. We love France so much that we want to push it in the right direction.
And we'll have special coverage of the election results here on France 24 from 7:30 p.m. Paris time. Turning to football news, the Netherlands have booked the final spot in the semi-finals of the European Championships. After beating Turkey by 2-1, they'll now face England in Dortmund on Wednesday after Gareth Southgate's team beat Switzerland on penalties. At stake, a place in the final against either France or Spain, who play on Tuesday. Our sports reporter Liam McGuinn is in Hamburg.
We now know our semi-final lineup here at Euro 2024. Following France-Spain will be England against the Netherlands. The Three Lions scraped past Switzerland, beating them on penalties. In truth, it was another tough watch for England fans. Switzerland were probably the better side, and they opened the scoring through Breel Embolo. He thought he'd sent his nation through to the semi-finals for the first time in their history, but Bukayo Saka had other ideas. He curled home from long range to equalise and send the tie to extra time. And then in extra time, Switzerland, probably the better side, but they couldn't make that dominance pay, and it went to penalties. England had lost 7 of their last 9 shootouts, but not today. Jordan Pickford, the hero, saving from Manuel Akanji. That gave Trent Alexander-Arnold the chance to step up, slam home his penalty, and send England through to their 3rd semi-final under Gareth Southgate. The day's other game saw the Netherlands come from behind to beat Turkey in Berlin. Turkey looked good in the first half, and they opened the scoring with a header, but after that, the Dutch really imposed themselves. They looked destined to score, and finally they did. A Stefan de Vrij header equalising, and just minutes later, Cody Gakpo forced the Turkish defender into an own goal. So the Dutch are through to the semi-final for the first time in the European competition in 20 years. Therefore, we know our final 4 will be France against Spain in Munich on Tuesday, and England face off against Netherlands in Dortmund on Wednesday.
Liam Gwynn reporting there. Well, up next, it's our Focus Report, which takes us this morning to Sierra Leone and its battle against rising drug and substance abuse. Earlier this year, the government described the situation as a national emergency. Of particular concern is an synthetic drug called Kush, sold on the streets for as little as 20 cents per hit. Sam Bradgis reports.
Kush smokers are not hard to find here in Funkia, a rundown district on the edge of Freetown. Like elsewhere in the capital of Sierra Leone, drug use is a common occurrence.
90% with the youth there with the smoke. This is the community where we live. With the youth there, the young man there, the young girl there, we need help. So once this year we don't come, we don't call this Kush.
Kajatu, a local representative, has seen the Kush addiction in her community spiral out of control in recent months.
Because this Kush don't come from in this country. Because I went by the top, so you don't know.
The drug is made from a potent mix of cannabis and other psychoactive substances like fentanyl. In neighborhoods like these, the addiction crisis is fueled by high levels of poverty and unemployment. A single dose costs just 20 cents, making it accessible even to the poorest communities.
We lost many souls there. When we brother there, we sister there, they smoke. You can get small injuries. And when you get no injury, then you not get way for take care of her. They can't swear. And when you swear, what do they think of? Not die.
The drug itself is so strong that many continue to use Kush despite knowing the risks. Even Kajatu has been unable to wean herself off the drug. Even if the high may only last a few minutes, the drug is strong enough to get large numbers of people hooked. Hundreds of young people in Freetown have died from overdoses in recent months, but the number of users continues to grow, even in rural communities. In April, President Julius Maada Bio declared drug addiction a national emergency and ordered the creation of new rehab centers to help deal with the crisis.
This is an opportunity for getting out from the drug. It's an opportunity we have to seize. So this is a sacrifice. Then, so Una Wekam, please, Una not say a begin. We'll get a start happening without anything with the inside, automatically you're disqualified.
Recently, some 60 young men and women entered this rehabilitation center in the north of the capital. Most of them came with their families, who hopelessly watched them slide into addiction. This is the country's first state-backed rehab center and was opened in late February. The patients all come voluntarily and are looked after at the government's expense. Abdul, who signed up with the help of his mother, is among them.
The thing is not good for our health. Well, I'm expecting that come and change us. However,
we have faced so much hardship, and I'm all alone with him and his brother.
The government plans to open 4 more centres throughout the country. At the moment, space is limited. The hope is that this first centre will prove a success, providing a model for others. Government ministers have taken an eager interest.
Or you'll be lucky because the people that when they wait for this service is them boku. So you will don't get an opportunity. No attempt them.
Over the course of 7.5 weeks, patients will receive treatment for things like lesions that often develop on internal organs after heavy kush use. There is also a great emphasis placed on psychiatric care.
One of the other biggest impacts of this drug is that it induces mental health in young people. So most of them present with drug-induced mental health conditions, particularly psychosis, some with schizophrenia. And of course, we can also see a lot of other social impacts of this drug.
Former patients known as ambassadors are often called in to give hope to the young addicts.
What's my name again? David C. What about you?
Evelyn Camara was among the first group of patients to be treated at the centre back in February. Coming back here stirs up fresh memories.
It will not be really easy for it. Some of it be they feel feverish, cold, water be the one we eye, water the one we know, some they feel pain. So they call the doctors and pass on and treat most of me. But it really not be easy for me.
At just 21, Evelyn is beginning to get her life back on track and is preparing to resume her studies again. Her work as an ambassador is essential to the government's plan to fight kush addiction at its source, in the very heart of communities.
Most of them, they are not aware of this program. But me, I can do everything possible because every single day I go out there to different communities, talk to them, encourage them.
Prevent and rehabilitate, those are the 2 key pillars of the government strategy. Kush use has recently spread to Liberia and Guinea, countries that will keep a close eye on Sierra Leone's response.
Watching Daybreak, time now for the latest sports news. First up, we have football action from the European Championships. Watching Daybreak, time now for the latest sports news. First up, we have football action from the European Championships.
And we are really proud to get the opportunity to play the semi-final Wednesday. We have to suffer tonight, but it's in the whole Euros that there is not an easy one. They put everything tonight, and was really an emotional mess.
Special boy, he's a dream to work with, wonderful family, and of course we're pleased for everybody, but for him especially when his went in.
There's 2 more games until we can change our lives and make some history that's never been made before. So we're really focused on that. We're going to enjoy tonight and obviously focus on the next game.
Über 120 Minuten so eine tolle Leistung, wo wir gezeigt haben, dass wir das nicht verdient haben. Tut mir leid für die Spieler und das stimmt mich sehr traurig. Aber einerseits können wir trotzdem sehr stolz sein auf unsere EM-Kampagne von der ersten Sekunde bis zum Schluss, wirklich wie wir zusammen gelebt haben, wie wir zusammen auch geträumt haben, auch Emotionen vermittelt haben, Freude vermittelt. Das ist das, was mich sehr positiv stimmt.
I wouldn't say it was, too many, because obviously we need to be ready to compete at the highest level for many, many weeks. But for sure, I didn't feel like I don't know, my tank of really pushing myself to the limits became suddenly empty, and I was kind of surprised. But I know what I did wrong after Roland Garros. I didn't really rest properly. I'm not gonna make this mistake again.
That is it from us for now. To stay with us though for more world news here on France 24.
Major budget cuts and additional borrowing. That's the solution Kenya's President William Ruto proposed on Friday to fill the nearly $0.7 billion hole in the budget caused by the scrapping of planned tax hikes. The announcement follows over 2 weeks of deadly nationwide protests, which pushed him last Thursday to withdraw the finance bill containing the controversial measures. Ruto has been caught between the frustration of Kenyans reeling from the rising cost of living and lenders like the International Monetary Fund who want him to reduce debt. The austerity measures include the dissolution of 47 state corporations, a 50% reduction in the number of government advisors, and the suspension of non-essential travel by state and public officers. The president also announced a forensic audit of the country's debt, which sits at more than 70% of gross domestic product. And he said he will soon announce changes to the government.
Two U.S. citizens on trial in the Democratic Republic of Congo for their alleged involvement in a failed coup in May told the court on Friday that they were coerced by the coup leader. On May 19, armed men briefly took over a presidential office in Kinshasa. The leader of the coup, U.S.-based Congolese politician Christian Malanga, was killed by security forces. Malanga's son, Marcel Malanga, who is 22 years old, and Benjamin Zalman Polum testified that Christian Malanga threatened to kill them if they did not comply. Marcel said he came to Congo at his father's invitation and had no prior involvement in the plot, adding that he was an American and he didn't speak French or Lingala. They are among over 50 individuals, including citizens from various countries, on trial for charges like illegal arms possession, criminal conspiracy, and terrorism. Zalma Polum, a long-time business associate of Malanga, denied involvement in the coup planning. The trial was adjourned until Monday, July 8th. It was a sad mood for the Portuguese fans after their side was eliminated by France in the ongoing Euros 2024. Goalless after 120 minutes, the match went to penalties, with the Portugal substitute João Felix hitting a goal post with his side's third spot kick. Hundreds of Portugal fans in Lisbon went through a roller coaster of emotions after this. It's always sad to fall like this, especially at Ronaldo's last Euro. It's always a bad sensation. In general, it was a good game. I think it was the team's best game so far. I think we should have won. And now we are here watching the French partying, and I'm not very happy. Meanwhile, the French fans jubilated all over France after the win against Portugal. The victory ended the recent heartbreak of Kylian Mbappe's and France's shoots, having lost in them at their last two major tournaments in the last 16 at the Euro 2021 and 2022 World Cup final. Really incredible. We were stressed, but now we are very happy. Thanks to you, French team. Thank you very much. That's all I can say. It was a great an hour and a half of stress right up to the penalty kicks, an exceptional end. We are delighted. France will now play Spain in the semi-finals after its extra time win over Germany in Stuttgart, with the Blues staying on course for a third European Championship title after the 1984 and the year 2000.
Today, a father arrested after 3 young children were killed in a house fire in Sydney's west. A horror day on New South Wales waters. 2 people drown in Sydney's south while authorities search for a man whose boat capsized at Lake Macquarie. A man killed by police in Townsville after allegedly threatening officers with a knife. And a PNG minister charged with assaulting a woman in the eastern suburbs of Sydney. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Ruby Cornish. A man's been arrested after a house fire in Sydney.
Headline news this hour. Widespread flooding ravaging parts of Asia. Close to 50 people have been killed in Nepal following floods, landslides and lightning strikes. Bangladesh is also not spared with 8 deaths and as heavy rains caused major rivers to burst their banks. An Israeli airstrike on a school in central Gaza has killed at least 16 people. Israel says it targeted militants using the compound as a hideout. Gaza officials accused Israel of attacking defenseless displaced civilians. Less than an hour before polls open in France for the second and final round of parliamentary elections, the National Rally Party is on course for a historic victory. But observers say a political stalemate is more likely, with many candidates pulling out to foil a possible far-right government. And that's the latest from the CNN newsroom.
French overseas territories began voting in the second round of legislative elections, with the far right battling against centrist and left-wing forces for the future of France. Residents of French Guiana, New Caledonia, St. Martin and other territories will be able to vote a day before those in France. French nationals living abroad will also be casting their votes, with parties across the political spectrum trying to secure as many votes as possible. In France itself, workers are setting up polling stations for the high-stakes second round of the legislative election on Sunday. French President Emmanuel Macron's centrist party came a distant third behind the surging far-right in last weekend's first round of voting for a new parliament. Macron called the snap election following the success of the far-right in recent European elections. In his first full day as Prime Minister, Keir Starmer said he's already discussed the war in Ukraine with world leaders. At a press conference, he also announced plans to attend a NATO summit in Washington next week.
I've already had a number of international calls, as you will know, and as you would have expected, to establish the relations across with other countries, to have really important discussions about Ukraine and other pressing issues. And Washington will be an opportunity for me to have further discussions with some of the leaders I've already spoken to and some that I'm due to speak to.
One of Starmer's first moves in power was to scrap the controversial Conservative policy to depart asylum seekers to Rwanda. His Labour Party delivered the biggest blow to the Conservatives in their two-century history in a landslide victory built on a platform of change. An overnight Russian strike left more than 100,000 Ukrainian households without power. The Ukrainian Energy Ministry reported that strikes in northern Ukraine had cut off electricity and water in the region. The northern Sumy region in Ukraine, which borders Russia, was plunged into darkness as strikes damaged energy infrastructure. Local media say drones hit the provincial capital, also called Sumy, cutting off water by hitting power lines which fed its system of pumps. In recent months, Russia has intensified its attacks against Ukraine's critical infrastructure in a renewed assault against the country's energy grid. In areas near the front line, communities are looking to provide social institutions with alternative heating sources before the beginning of winter. They're installing wood and pellet boilers in schools and medical institutions in preparation for possible interruptions in electricity and gas due to Russian strikes. Russia said its forces had captured a village in Ukraine's eastern Donetsk region as Moscow continues to advance slowly across the battlefield. Hamas has given initial approval for a US-backed ceasefire deal in Gaza, according to a Hamas and an Egyptian official. They reportedly dropped a key demand that Israel gives an upfront commitment for a complete end to the war. Months of ceasefire talks had stumbled over this issue. The Israeli Prime Minister had offered to pause the fighting but not end it until Israel reached its goal of destroying Hamas's military and governing capabilities. At least 15 were killed when an Israeli strike targeted a school turned shelter in a Palestinian refugee camp. Iran elected a new reformist president after its last leader died in a helicopter crash. Reformist candidate Masoud Pezeshkian won the Iranian runoff presidential election, besting hardliner competition by promising to reach out to the West. However, his aims will be challenged by an Iranian government still largely held by hardliners, the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas, and Western fears over Tehran enriching uranium to near weapon-grade levels. In his campaign, he promised no radical change against Iran's religious theocracy and reinforced that the Iranian supreme leader was the final arbiter of all matters of state in the country. A vote counted by the authorities put Pezeshkian as the winner with 16.3 million votes. Authorities put the election turnout at 49.6%, which is still historically low for an Iranian presidential election.
Destruction, but their idealism met a bitter end. Nicaragua, a dream of revolution, starts July 20th on DW.
This is DW News and these are our top stories. At least 16 people have been killed in an Israeli airstrike on a UN school in Gaza, according to the Hamas-run health ministry. The school in Al-Nusayrat was reportedly sheltering displaced Palestinians. The Israeli military says its aircraft, quote, struck several terrorists operating in structures located in the area of UNRWA's Al-Jawni school. US officials are warning people living along the coast of Texas to prepare for the potential arrival of Tropical Storm Beryl. It is expected to regain hurricane strength as it moves across the Gulf of Mexico. Beryl caused at least 11 deaths as it passed through Caribbean islands. Voters in Iran have chosen a new president. Former Health Minister Masoud Pezeshkian captured well over 2 million votes, more than his hardline rival, in Friday's runoff. He was the only candidate promising reform allowed to run, but his ability to deliver change in the shadow of Iran's supreme leader is limited. You're watching DW News from Berlin. You can get more news on our website at dw.com.
Thank you for watching and privilege of your time. This is Amir Shakil 5858. I am Amir Woodman. Have a good life.